Thank you, Senator Sinowicki. You've heard the opening to the Legislative Confirmation Report of the Nebraska Retirement Systems Committee. The floor is now open for discussion. Senator Chambers.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, although the name Mrs. Chambers was mentioned prominently, Mr. Chambers is here to tell you that there's no connection whatsoever, but I nevertheless am going to vote for this confirmation. Thank you.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 470 is a bill introduced by Senator Chambers. It's a bill for an act relating to criminal history records, changes the provision relating to dissemination of information. Introduced January 17, referred to the Judiciary Committee, advanced to general file. Yesterday, Senator Chambers presented the bill, Mr. President. I have no amendments pending at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Chambers, yesterday you provided opening to LB 470. At this time, would you like to take a couple moments and provide a summary of where we are?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, this is a bill that was drafted in conjunction with the city prosecutor of Omaha because many cases arise where an individual has a notation of arrest for which no conviction occurred, the charges may have been dropped, no hearings, whatever. It deals only with innocent people. So what this bill will do is to, in a tiered system, require that the names of those people be dropped off that list, which would be available to the public. However, their name would remain in the records of the courts and law enforcement. It would just cease to be a public record. And I think that makes it clear. Then I can answer further questions, Mr. Speaker, as people call on me.
Number one, if you could take a minute or so and describe your opinion of the fiscal note. The first thing that caused me hesitancy when reading through the bill was the fiscal note, and I understand that you might have some further opinion to offer on that fiscal note. If you could take a minute to address that, I would appreciate it, and I think the body would also.
Well, Senator Fulton, I've discussed that with a number of senators, including the Speaker, and I'm not going to push for that fiscal note to be accepted. That figure was given by a software company that said it will put together a program of this kind. So I'm not satisfied that there's going to be any significant additional cost because Omaha, which helped originate this bill, pointed out that it is no extra cost involved for them. So that fiscal note may be discarded as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Explain a little bit more your concerns with the term active prosecution and why, therefore, it's necessary to have this bill.
Yes, that's a very good question, and that goes to the heart of it, Senator Fulton. As I've said, the city prosecutor came to me because we both had been approached by people facing this problem. He pointed out that the term 1 year of active prosecution is ambiguous, and it doesn't mean the same throughout the state, and sometimes to individual attorneys within an office. So to get rid of that ambiguity, since it's not clear what it means in terms of active prosecution, it would be better to give specific time frames when each one of these issues that would be involved would result in dropping that person's name.
Then would it be accurate to say that if the words active prosecution had a consistent relevance across the state, then there wouldn't be a need for this bill?
That's true because everywhere the same standard would be applied, but to define active prosecution is virtually impossible. Okay. Mr. President, Senator Fulton stole my thunder. I didn't say it while he was asking me the question, but that was the first thing I was going to launch into an explanation of because it explains why we need a bill such as this. But it also points out why that fiscal note is outrageous and I think unnecessary because in the instances where somebody in a given area might decide that active prosecution is not occurring or will not occur, these names are dropped. But the circumstances differ. So this bill is designed to do away with ambiguity. The way this usually comes up is that a person will have had an arrest many, many years prior. The idea of background searches is of relatively recent vintage. So a person may even have gotten a job despite the fact that if a background search had been made, this notation of arrest would have popped up. And it could be one of those situations defined in or described in this bill where there were no charges ever filed, that the prosecutor wanted the charges dismissed, or any of the other sets of circumstances herein. That was not done or even attempted to be done because the person assumed since I didn't go to trial, I was not convicted, my record is clean. So many years down the line, including today, when a background check is made, that pops up and all of a sudden that person is not allowed to have the job. This that I've described is the usual situation that will call this fact to somebody's attention. They are caught in this web. A guilty person, meaning one tried, convicted, and sentenced, will have means provided within the law to expunge the record, to have some things set aside, can even get a pardon. But if you're innocent, you cannot seek a pardon because you were not convicted of anything. There's nothing to pardon. There is no procedure or process in the law to allow an innocent person to have this notation of arrest dropped from the public record. It will still be available to the courts and to the police agencies because, as Mr. Conboy, the city prosecutor, wrote to me, it will not affect the courts or law enforcement and should not result in additional cost since all records are now kept separately for other reasons. The public record is already different from the record kept by law enforcement. This law would not constitute an unfunded mandate, but rather another change in the existing method of populating the two current record systems. It is surprising how many innocent people are unknowingly affected by a record entry they may not even realize exists. It is even more surprising when they learn that while convicted people have several methods of clearing their record, those arrested but not convicted face a permanent entry. Then he thanked me for undertaking this effort. So I hope that at least will give you the rationale for the bill, and any specific questions you have, I will answer them. But with reference to the 3 tiers, the reason there is a different time period is because during our discussions, Mr. Conboy and I wanted to be sure that each one of these categories will have run its course and that there, in fact, will not be any charges filed.
1 minute.
That a person, in fact, will have successfully completed a diversion plan, or if charges had been filed, but inappropriately, within a 3-year period, everything would have run its course, and that would then be taken care of. But in every case, the person is innocent in the face and eyes of the law. Thank you, Mr. President. Wallman, thank you, Mr. President, but I've explained it as clearly as I'm able to do, so I don't need additional time, but I will answer any questions that anybody wants to ask me. I'm trying to avoid being redundant, and I don't know what else I would say. Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, here is the issue. Does this society mean what it says when it says an individual is innocent till proved guilty?
Please record, Mr. Clerk.
41 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the advancement of LB 470.
LB 470 does advance to ENR initial. Thank you, Senator Chambers. You're recognized to open on LB 470A.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, I had said earlier that we could just dispense with the A bill, but as pointed out by the Speaker, that would not be a responsible position. The State Patrol may be able to justify the figure that they've given to us. Our Appropriations Committee Chair indicated that whatever amount we appropriate to carry out a bill can be earmarked so that the money in that appropriation will be spent only for the purposes of that bill, and if there's anything left over after the necessary expenditure has taken place, it will lapse back to the general fund or wherever lapsed money goes. It never lapsed into my lap, so I just can't deal with that. But I'm going to ask that we advance the A bill, which is the way our process operates. In the interim, between today when we advance the bill and the matter comes before us again on select file, there are individual senators who said they will talk to the appropriate people with the State Patrol. I will make inquiries, and we will come back at that time with figures that are firm. If the State Patrol can establish that this is the amount of money that is needed to carry out the purposes of the bill, and if the legislature believes that innocent people should have this notation of arrest expunged or dropped from the public record, we should be prepared to spend the amount of money necessary to have that done. But it would not be an ongoing $500,000 a year expenditure. This would be to put their system in the state it needs to be in to carry out the purposes of this bill. So I'm asking that we advance the A bill, and if you have questions which you think I can answer, ask me. If you think I can't answer them but you want to show that I'm merely human, ask me. And if you have questions about our appropriation process, Chairman Heidemann has pointed out that he's willing to give reassurances or explanations on that score. That's all I would have. Thank you, Mr. President.
29 ayes, 2 nays, Mr. President, on the advancement of 470A.
LB 470 does advance.
Poodle's bite cannot inflict pain. Remember that those little teeth crush bones, and we have bones, and before you get to that bone is flesh and muscle, so I don't want to upset Nicole. In reality, with all of the people I've discovered who love animals, I am shocked that it is so difficult for us to get money to protect these animals, these creatures who bring us so much joy, so much solace, when nobody else can be relied on. And we quibble about what amounts to pennies. Every time we refuse to provide the protection needed, there are untold numbers of animals suffering unspeakable cruelties. So this is a bill that I support. I would be in favor of a total general fund appropriation and in a greater amount than what is in this bill. But there is a practical aspect to this entire discussion, and Senator Mines is recognizing that and bowing to it. We have to get something, and this bill is a minimal amount. I hope that we will adopt this bill, and it will just be a start. If you have an animal that had meant anything to you, think of how you feel if you came upon somebody bludgeoning that animal. It has been found by HHS and other social welfare type agencies that when you have a home where animals are being abused, then you'll find child abuse, spouse abuse, and other types of human abuse occurring at the same time. So since we have made these animals dependent on us, taken away their ability to survive in the wild, we owe something to them as a society. This bill is an attempt to assume and discharge that responsibility. You must be faithful stewards over those living creatures delivered to you. You were granted dominion over all of the earth, and in exercising that dominion, we must show some compassion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers.